Welcome everybody! Today I will be teaching you how to use basics of the program Unity, which is used to create games in language C#. A lot of popular games were made in Unity. For example, we have Escape from Tarkov, Among Us, Fall Guys, Cuphead, Hollow Knight, and more even games. Every game in Unity is unique, and a lot of indie game developers are using it because of its simplicity in use. This is the default view when we first open up Unity. You can customize the layout. For example, I might drag out the game window so that it sits next to the scene view. And I could do the same with the console window, so it's over here next to the project panel. And I might also just resize some of these panels, because they're taking up a lot of space. And if we want to save our custom layout, we can just go to the layout dropdown on the top right corner and check save layout. I'll just call it my custom layout. And then of course we can switch back to default at any time we want. So the Unity editor is made up of these 6 main panels: the hierarchy, the scene, the game, the inspector, the project and the console. The hierarchy shows a list of all objects that are currently in our scene. So at the moment I have a camera object and a light source. If I were to add a default cube, the ad would show up here, as well as in the scene view, where I can move it around, or by changing the rotation to in the top left, I can rotate it and scale it. All of these things have shortcuts, of course. It's W to move, E to rotate, and R to scale. In the scene view I can zoom with the mouse wheel, and I can hold down Alt and left mouse to rotate, and middle mouse to drag to pan view. That little gizmo in the top right allows us to rapidly switch between viewpoints. We can also change between perspective and isometric mode by toggle the cube in the middle. The game window shows a preview of our game, seen through the eyes of our camera object. We can enter and exit play mode over here, although currently not much will happen since we haven't programmed anything yet. The inspector shows us information about selected object. Remember how in the programming work we have something like composition, which is a way of building functionality out of multiple classes that each define a single behavior. Well, here we can see an example of this work. Our cube object has 4 components attached, all of which are simply classes that Unity has written and added to this object to make it into a cube. If I remove the box collider, it loses collision functionality. If I remove the mesh render component, it loses rendering functionality. The transform component is what allows us to move the object around as well as to rotate and scale it. The project window contains all of the assets for our project, so in a full project we'd have lots of scripts and 3D models, audio files and so on listed here. We can drag things from our project file into our scene. For example, let me add a simple Flash class script that I created earlier before the project. If I now add this onto the cube object, you can see that it appears as a new component on this object in the inspector. If we now press play, we can see the new behavior taking effect. It's worth getting used to the idea that while we are in play mode, our changes are not permanent. I might remove this script, for example, and change the position of the object, but as soon as I exit play mode, it reverts back to how it was before. This behavior is beneficial, however, as it allows us to try new things while the game is running, without worrying about ruining our work. Finally, there is a console window. The console window allows us to print messages from scripts containing information about, for example, the value of variable that allows us to track down bugs in our code when things are not behaving as intended. It's also here that we'll receive error messages if we program something incorrectly. The last thing I like to mention is that we can have multiple scenes, so if I save this scene, I might call it a kill scene, then I can go create new scene. In here I make the sphere objects and then save it and call it sphere scene. Now I can switch between two scenes by double clicking on them, and obviously there are always ways for us to switch between the music count during our game as well. So as you can imagine, this is very useful for when we want multiple levels in our game, or even just for spectating the game from menus of the game itself. Okay, so hopefully you now have the broad understanding of Unity Editor. Goodbye and have a good day.